Testing. Test 1, 2. Okay everyone, let's start the what if. What if Yamcha lit the kaioken? Part 6. Yamcha was standing in front of Turles. The leaves were quiet. Not even a breath of wind rustled through them. He took a deep breath. He had not used the kaioken in 3 years. He was probably going to be a little rusty. Very rusty. So to start off, he should probably use base kaioken as a warm-up. Yamcha took a deep breath and shouted, "Kaioken!" and lunged at Turles. Turles glanced at the number on his scouter. Yamcha's power had nearly doubled. He laughed. "So is this your trump card? This is where all that bravado of yours comes from, is it?" He dodged Yamcha's first attack and swung his foot down onto his back, but his foot went straight through Yamcha. Turles looked around frantically. How in the... His scouter sounded off, signaling him to look above him. Yamcha had a short sigh of relief. He'd almost got hit by that attack. Turles mocked him, shouting out, "Well, is that all?" Yamcha had looked at his hands. They were shaking. His muscles were under so much strain from just a base kaioken. Not only did he lose practice with the kaioken over time, but he just got a massive power boost, and his newfound power was proving rather hard to control. Yamcha shook his head. He needed to focus on the battle at hand. He looked at Turles and with a smirk said, "I'm only getting started. Kaioken times 5! Yamcha was coated in a red aura, and just as soon he appeared in front of Turles. Turles easy moved out of the way of his first attack. My, you're much faster now, but not fast enough." Turles threw a punch at Yamcha, only for it to phase right through him yet again. Yamcha appeared behind him. "Over here!" Turles turned with a face of utter shock as Yamcha launched his attack. For a second he thought it made contact, but Yamcha's attack went right through him. Turles then appeared in front of Yamcha with blinding speed. "Now who's seeing double?" Turles firmly pressed one finger on Yamcha's forehead, and let out a burst of ki, and with it Yamcha was sent barreling into the Tree of Might, his impact forming a large crater that shook the tree. Turles flew above him, hovering there with his arms crossed. "Did you think I would fall for the same trick twice?" Turles lowered himself down to Yamcha. Yamcha laughed, holding up that same bravado he always does. "I don't know, you seem pretty stupid. I mean, you never even noticed." Turles asked. "Noticed what?" Just then, someone grabbed Turles' back. He looked to see who it was. "Yamcha? Who? What? But I just..." He looked back to see Yamcha was no longer in the crater. Was this the same trick as before? No, it was something different. He forced himself out of the deadlock and turned to throw a ki blast at Yamcha, but Yamcha was just barely able to evade it using another afterimage. Yamcha laughed. "What's the matter? You look distracted," Yamcha says while standing on a nearby branch. Turles was tired of being tossed and turned by these tricks. "Enough! Fight me without all your tricks!" Yamcha popped his neck. "Funny you mention that, because I just got warmed up." Yamcha surges with power as he shouts, "Kaioken times 10! The numbers on Turles' scouter rose higher and higher, until it blew up right on his face. Turles was in shock. "Impossible! These scouters can read any power level up to 100 million! Yamcha appeared behind Turles with a vengeance. They clashed shortly for a moment, but suddenly Yamcha grabbed both of his arms and started repeatedly kicking him in the chest. Turles could feel his ribs starting to break. In a fit of desperation, he opened his mouth to let out a beam of ki. Turles and Yamcha were both gasping for air, taking a moment to catch their breath. Turles laughed. "You're a very skilled fighter. That being said, you're still not on my level. I'm afraid I've been holding back this entire fight." Yamcha smirks. "Guess I'd better stop holding back as well, right?" Yamcha closed his eyes and took deep breaths. "Come on, buddy. Don't give out on me yet." Yamcha knew he probably wouldn't be able to maintain a times 20 for long. He was already exhausted, and his lack of practice was not going to help. Yamcha took one sharp breath and shouted, "Kaioken times 20!" Turles smirked. "How adorable. You think this—" His words were cut short by a solid punch to his gut. The wind was knocked out of him. He could barely remain upright. Yamcha was not letting up. He kicked Turles away and shouted, "Ka-me-ha-me-ha!" Turles saw the attack coming towards him and braced for impact. The wave sent him straight through the tree and out the other end. The attack left him bloody and bruised, but not quite dead. Yamcha lowered his arms. Damn it, I can still feel his energy. The Namekians were trying their hardest against the crew of Turles. One of them shouted, "Looks like Yamcha's having trouble!" This distracted the other two. Unfortunately, it left one of them wide open for a blast straight through the gut. And then he was tossed into the seat by Caco. Curses! They got basket! Bucket turned around. Damn them. Hey, I have an idea. The Namekian looked confused for a moment, but nodded. I agree. It's the only way we can win this fight and save Namek. Bucket placed his hand on the other Namekian, and with a flash of light, they were one Namekian. Turles' crew froze as the number on their scouters skyrocketed. In a flash, he ripped the head off of Caco and turned to the others with a glare. Daiz and Amond fled from this new warrior, trying their best to reach a fruit, or at the very least contact Turles, but he was not answering his scouter. The crew did not get far before they too lost their heads. Bucket looked to the water to find his friend. He took a quick glance to the bottom, trying to search for his energy, but felt nothing. Letting out a sigh, Bucket flew over to Yamcha. Are you okay? Yamcha laughed it off. Yeah, I'm fine, just a bit winded. On the other side of the tree, Turles was looking around frantically for a fruit. He kept flying around, kept searching, but he could not find any fruits, let alone a ripe one. Blasted, where did they all go? Bucket looked around. He could feel Turles' power. Even in his weakened state, the Namekian knew he was no match for this Turles. The Namekian held out his hand and poured all the ki he could into Yamcha. Yamcha felt full of energy again. The Namekian said, I couldn't restore your power to its fullest, but at the very least this will help you recover faster. Yamcha nodded. Yeah, I feel much better. Yamcha flew off around the tree to Turles. Looks like you found me. Well, what now? Turles was in no condition to put up a fight, but Yamcha was not going to hold back and risk Turles surviving his next attack. Kaioken times 20! Yamcha launched himself forward and kicked Turles in the chest. A torrent of blood flew out of his mouth and spilled onto his busted battle armor. Yamcha readied his final attack. Good luck surviving this next one. Ka-me-ha-me. While Yamcha was charging up his final attack, Turles was looking to the sky, cursing his luck. When suddenly his eyes caught something, and turned a slight red, and his look of defeat turned into a malicious grin. Yamcha shouted out, "Ah!" The entire island was enveloped with a massive explosion. By all accounts, Turles should have been dead. By all logic, he should not be alive. But he was. Not only that, but Yamcha could feel his power level rising. He looked down to the barren rubble. He realized why Turles' power was growing. He was transforming into a giant ape. Wait, but that needs a moon, right? He turned around to look up at the sky, and clear as day there was a moon smack dab in the middle. But, wait, that makes no sense. He threw a massive blast at it, but it just went straight through. Then he remembered something from a couple months, or maybe even years back. It was just a passing conversation, but Rasin and Lakasei discussed a machine they used as a last resort, to unleash Turles' great ape form, in a tense situation. Damn it, where are they? He looked around but could not find them. In fact, he could not sense anything. Rasin and Lakasei have a field around the ship that conceals the power level of anyone inside. He thought it was just for scouters, but apparently works on its ability to sense them as well. However, Yamcha was out of time to curse his luck, as he needed to start moving. Now! Turles was transformed into a mighty Oozaru, and he was completely out of control. He needed to get some distance. However, the raging Oozaru had all of its anger focused directly on him. Turles may not be in control, but the ape definitely remembered Yamcha's beating. Yamcha evaded the Oozaru for as long as he could, using kaioken for speed boosts when necessary. Eventually, despite all of his tricks, Yamcha was struck by Turles' tail and slammed into the ground. The Oozaru charged up a mighty mouth beam, ready to destroy Yamcha. But suddenly, he was distracted. Hey, ugly! Up here. Ain't these what you're looking for? The Oozaru looked up to find Yamcha, but oddly, he was holding 6 fruits and didn't seem injured at all. Hey, big guy, better come and get these before I eat them all myself! Yamcha turned and flew off, carrying the fruits in his arms. The Oozaru gave chase, and in just a few seconds was able to catch up, and with one thunderous punch, Yamcha was sent to the ground in a cloud of smoke. But when the dust cleared, something was off. It was Puar. Back at the crater he was thrown into, Yamcha was only half conscious. But still yet he felt Puar's ki drop constantly. He couldn't sense anything from Puar anymore. Suddenly, his eyes shot open in anger, and the rubble around him lifted off of him as he screamed in rage. In a red aura, he started soaring towards the Oozaru, screaming with immense anger, Turles! The Oozaru was still in confusion and off guard as Yamcha slammed into his chest. This sent the Oozaru flying into a nearby mountain. Turles, I will personally make sure you're given your own personal room in the deepest, darkest pits of hell! As soon as the Oozaru picked himself up, he saw Yamcha charging it up an attack. Spirit Ball! Suddenly, a ball of energy almost the size of Yamcha himself was thrown at Turles. However, the beast easily evaded and jumped out of the way, and started to charge at Yamcha. Without the ape noticing, Yamcha turned around the spirit ball right towards the beast's tail. When it got within reach, Yamcha closed his hand into a fist, and just as soon, the spirit ball transformed into a large disc. Spirit Kienzan! The disc was flung in an upward motion, severing the beast's tail from its body. Turles de-transformed into base, and Yamcha collapsed to the ground in pain. It took a moment for Turles to notice Yamcha, and to realize his tail had been cut off. And when he noticed, he clenched his fist in rage. A human? Cut off my tail? How dare you? Turles walked over to Yamcha and started kicking him repeatedly in the gut. Yamcha raised his arm and gave Turles the middle finger, before quickly lowering it to the ground. Turles kicked Yamcha away from him, and charged up in a ball of energy in his hand. Suddenly, however, Turles felt a sharp pain run down his back. He looked behind him to see a large, deep cut straight through his back. It nearly cut him in half. Turles fell to the ground and quickly started bleeding out. How? The spirit Kienzan I used to cut off your tail never disappeared. It just stayed in the air until I commanded it to come back down. That middle finger was not just a gesture, you know. Turles could not believe his ears. Felled by such a cheap trick. Turles' body became still, and his key signature vanished. Moments later, Bucket arrived with a much younger Namekian at his side. Can you heal him? The Namekian said, Yes, one moment. Yamcha felt his energy return, and his body put itself back together, and soon he was able to walk. Yamcha slowly stood up and stared straight at Poir. Is she really, Dende nodded. Yes, I'm sorry. Yamcha lowered his head and grabbed his eyes in an attempt to hold back tears. Bucket said, Oh, don't go crying. Just bring your friend back with the Dragon Balls. Yamcha heard his words, but Poir dying was a lot more than a simple loss of life. Dende understood that. He understood how touching Poir's final act to save Yamcha was, and just how bad Yamcha must feel for letting him die in the first place. After about 30 minutes, he was ready to go and revive everyone. We already gathered the Dragon Balls for you, but before that, Dende had brought over the fruits. I can return the stolen energy back to Namek. However, our planet can recover from the stolen energy contained in just one fruit. So if you want one as a reward, Yamcha asked, aren't the Dragon Balls my reward? Well, you have to use 2 wishes to revive your friends and 1 wish to return home. Hardly a reward, isn't it? Yamcha nodded. He reached for the fruit, but instead asked, could you turn it into an extract? Turles told me the extract could revive the dead. Then they said, sure, if that's what you want. Yamcha nodded. And with his extract in hand, he said, Dragon, take me, Poir, and Piccolo to Bulma. He had remembered to be specific, as Dende told him. Suddenly, in an instant, Yamcha was returned to Earth along with Poir and Piccolo. Only moments later, the Namekians could feel 2 hostile power levels suddenly appear. As they flew towards the location, they saw Rasin and Lakasei carrying the corpse of Turles and Daiz into the ship. However, they had to drop Daiz and run to the ship. The Namekians would have caught them had they not used 2 flash bombs. While they were blinded, Daiz and Lakasei were able to launch their ship into space. Thanks to the cloaking technology, they could hide their power levels easily. One of the Namekians, however, saw it leave the atmosphere and launched an attack in the general direction. Simply by sheer luck, the blast landed on the ship. Rasin, quickly! We need to get out of here! He nodded and launched the ship into deep space at top speeds, getting far out of the range of the Namekians' attacks. Lakasei, quickly! Grab the emergency bottle! Lakasei opened the door to a large ice-filled room. In the middle of the room sat a solitary bottle. He ran out quickly and poured it over Turles. Turles' body began to violently shake as his wounds closed and his body resurrected. Turles woke up gasping for breath, and immediately read the situation. Gripping his chest in rage, he shouted, Set a straight course for Earth, now! Lakasei nodded and ran to the control room. Rasin said, Sir, we have emergency seeds if you want to grow any trees along the way. Turles shouted, I don't give a damn about that tree! After all those fruits, what good did it do me? I was killed by a human! It took everything Turles had in him to prevent him from punching a hole in his ship or kill Lakasei on the spot. Lakasei asked, Then how will you get stronger? Turles said, The same way Yamcha did. I'm going to train. After taking a few deep breaths, he said, And maybe I'll grow a few trees along the way. Turles went into the hangar room and to find Yamcha's ship. Well, anyway, I think that's where we should end this video. Good luck with tomorrow and every day after.